the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday night. We had a bit of a false start there. Somebody shut my internet down. Now, I have my suspicion, and I think, whoops, let's put on some video. I think it was Biden, who's actually doing a live address to the nation, I guess, right now. And he wanted to make sure he got your attention. So I think it was Biden shut me down. He wanted to make sure that you guys were all over there opposite your televisions, listening to him. So there you go. The Yaron Brook Show has made it. The Biden administration is trying to silence me. Or it could be the massive amount of rain that just started pouring just as I started talking, and it looks like for a little bit shut down the internet in my building in Puerto Rico. So probably the latter, probably not the Egyptians, as some of you were speculating earlier. So I'm going to recap what we talked about earlier. As I said, we're going to be talking today about Russians falling out of windows. We're going to talk about really Russians falling out of windows. It sounds like Murders in the Building, almost that series. Russians falling out of windows is a thing. We'll talk about that. Generally, oligarchs dying mysterious deaths is a thing. One of them died today, so we'll see. We're going to talk about Russians. We're going to talk about the economy and Powell, his speech at, where was it? Out in Wyoming, right? Powell gave his annual Federal Reserve spiel. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what he said and what it means, what implications there are for the economy, and so forth. And what else are we going to talk about? Other stuff in the news. One of those things that I mentioned earlier was it looks like Poland wants reparations from the Germans for sins they committed during World War II. So no video again. I'm back online. All right, Jackson Hole. Okay, it looks like we're alive. We're engaged. There's life after all. So we'll talk about a little bit about reparations, and I made the joke earlier that Jews should be asking for reparations from the Egyptians for, I think, just a percentage of all the tourist revenue that the pyramids generate. After all, it is Jewish slaves who built those pyramids, and therefore we should be demanding reparations. So maybe we'll talk about reparations. We'll see. And then, of course, you get to decide what we're going to be talking about because you get to ask questions. Your Super Chat questions determine a big chunk of the show. So please use the Super Chat feature to ask questions. We've got a goal for Super Chat, typically $650 a night. We're off to a start. And, join us. You can use the Super Chat to support the show, but also to ask questions about anything. And I get to answer them to the extent that I can and then know how to. All right, so let's see. Yes, that stoppage kind of threw me off my pacing and so I'm a little out of it, so I apologize for that. All right, let's start with the news today out of Russia that, what is his name? Maganov, who is a senior businessman, an oligarch in Russia. He's the chairman of Russia's second largest oil company, Lukoil. Was found dead at the bottom of a hospital window. So theory is, as these Russian theories go, theory is he committed suicide. So the 67-year-old plunged to his death, although the news says circumstances surrounding his fall were unclear. It turns out, though, that a bunch of Russians have been falling to their deaths out of apartment buildings and hospitals and office buildings in the last couple of years. That's why I called it Russians falling out of windows. Weird. Who knows? Maybe this is maybe the radioactive stuff takes too long and too risky to eliminate your opponents. Maybe just throwing them out of windows makes more sense. So this falling of somebody involved in the oil company seemed a little weird. So I looked it up a little bit, and there was an article in Newsweek called, the title of the article is, Russians keep mysteriously falling off from windows to their deaths. I'm not making this up. It's an article in Newsweek. This is not even the list, which we'll get to in a minute, of all the oligarchs that have died since the Ukraine war started. Now, I just want to remind you, this is Russia that Jordan Peterson and many people on the right say is our ally, is our friend, is the West. We shouldn't say anything negative about them. And Donald Trump once said, when he was told that Putin kills journalists, Donald Trump's response was, well, we kill people too. Why is that a big deal? Well, I'm sure you could probably combine a list of Americans falling out of windows. But let's just take this list. Let's just go with it. It's fun, right? Russians falling out of windows, I guess is morbid, but here we go. So in December 2021, Yegor Prosvinin, the founder of a nationalist website, Sputnik and Pogrom, died after falling out of a window of a residential building in the center of Moscow. He allegedly first threw a knife and a gas canister out the window, and then he fell. Maybe he was using it to break the window so he could fall out of it. He was a supporter of the annexation of Crimea, but then predicted a civil war and collapse of the Russian Federation. Not a good message before you go to war. On October 19, 2021, a Russian diplomat was found dead after falling from a window at the Russian embassy in Berlin. Well, it turned out he maybe wasn't a diplomat, but was probably an undercover officer with the Russian FSB. It also turned out that he was the son of General Alexander Zalo, the deputy director of the FSB's second service. So who knows what's going on there. In late December 2020, Alexander Kagansky, a top Russian scientist reportedly working on a COVID-19 vaccine at the time, was found dead with a stab wound after falling from his high-rise apartment in St. Petersburg. Supposedly, he stabbed himself and then fell out the window. There are also reports of healthcare workers falling out of hospital windows, some to their deaths in Russia during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm just reporting the news. I don't make it up. And in this case, I don't even know how to interpret it. So it just is what it is. In July, now this one is interesting. This one is really interesting. In July, Dan Rappaport, a 52-year-old Latvian-American investment banker, an outspoken Putin critic, I mean, this guy really went after Putin, was found dead after falling from a luxury apartment building in Washington, D.C. Police say they don't suspect foul play, but the case remains under investigation. This guy, I remember this guy. He's a private equity fund guy, I think. He had a lot of investment in Russia, made a lot of money in Russia in the 90s and 2000s, and then turned on Putin and was this extraordinary critic of Putin's. And he claimed that his life was in danger, claimed that they were trying to kill him. Well, he's dead, falling out of a window. It seems like there's a pattern here. Maybe this is the way we get rid of political opponents. Rappaport's friends fear he was assassinated, that the whole thing is highly suspicious. Anyway, that's Rappaport. Rappaport's, by the way, Rappaport former business partner, I shouldn't laugh because people are dying here. Rappaport's former business partner, Sergei Tkachenko, fell to his death from a Moscow apartment building in 2017. Russians falling out of windows and dying. This is much cheaper than radioactive poison. It's much cheaper than poison-tipped umbrellas, which is the traditional way in which the Russian Secret Service have been killing people they don't like. I guess now they just throw them out the window. Sometimes they stab them first, and then they throw them out the windows, which is an obvious strategy for suicide. Stab, jump. I would do that. All right. Now, that's not the only thing, because there's an overlap here, because the guy who jumped out the window today, or yesterday, was an oligarch. So the other avenue of research is, well, oligarchs, what's the life expectancy of an oligarch in Russia these days? And it turns out not very long. It turns out that 7 Russian oligarchs have died under kind of mysterious circumstances in recent months. So I'm going to read you this. Now, this is morbid, and this is some of this is brutal. So bear with me, I guess, because this is a little kind of spooky. But let's go through this. Let's start with Sergei Protosenya. This is a millionaire oligarch, was found hanging in a rented luxury villa in Spain on April 19th of this year. His wife and 18-year-old daughter were also found dead in their apartment with stab wounds. The police assuming this is a murder-suicide, that he killed his daughter and his wife and then committed suicide. Other family members doubt this, so there's a lot of people questioning this interpretation of it. But okay, one, murder-suicide, maybe. Let's not jump to conclusions. So let's look at a week earlier. Vladislav Avayev was found dead of a gunshot wound in his Moscow apartment. This is April 18th, so a week earlier, along with his wife and 13-year-old daughter. Now, the first guy was involved in a natural gas production company. This guy is the former vice president of Gazprombank, a privately owned subsidiary of the Russian energy giant, and the police investigating this as a murder-suicide. So he killed his wife and daughter, and he killed himself. 2 in a week. Okay, and then there's Vasily Melenkov. Vasily was found dead in his apartment in Novgorod, Russia, right? On March 23rd, so like less than a month before this. The billionaire was stabbed to death, as were his wife and 2 sons, 10 and 4. The murder weapons were found on the scene. The police are investigating the theory that Malenkov killed his family and then killed himself. 3 in a month. 3 murder-suicides in a month, all related to, what was he a billionaire of? He owned a medical equipment supply company, but all oligarchs, all Russian oligarchs. Now, supposedly, he was really hurt by Western sanctions. He killed his 4-year-old kid because he was hurt by Western sanctions. Really? And then there's Mikhail Watford, who's a Ukrainian-born oligarch, also in Russia. Russian, was found, Ukrainian-born, but associated with Russia, was found hanged in his garage in his home in Surrey, England on February 28th. He had moved to the 1960s after he's made his fortune in oil and gas, right? The Surrey police, they're investigating it, but they don't think there's anything suspicious at this time. Alexander Chulkatkin, Mikhailov was found hanged in an apartment garage near St. Petersburg on February 25th, just 3 days before this other oligarch. Police told the Gazeta that they found a suicide note conveniently right next to his body. Anymore? Yeah, Leonard Shulman, another top Gazprom executive, was found dead in a cottage in the same village in January before the invasion. Again, suicide note, 2 hangings, suicide note. I guess they went from hangings to murder-suicides to throwing people out of windows. And then there's Alexander Subitin, a former top executive of Russian oil company Lukoil, was found dead in his house in some place in Russia. He supposedly suffered a heart attack, but a source told TASS, the news agency, the Russian news agency, that he had arrived at the house in severe alcohol and drug intoxication the day before and was found dead in a shaman's house in a room used for Jamaican voodoo rituals. As I said, I don't make this up. Russia, this bastion of Western civilization, this beacon of hope for the West, because again, it's anti-left, seems to be killing people off in ever more creative ways. And it seems like children involved in this as well, and maybe voodoo. Maybe the voodoo was used to cause the murder-suicides. That would save you on Hitman if you could just voodoo them out of existence. That is Russia. That is Russia. Now, it could be that there's just a lot of depressed people in Russia. It could be that there's just a lot of confused people in Russia. I mean, after all, suicide rates in the United States are very high, particularly over the last 2 years. Deaths as a consequence of overdose of opioids and other things are very high in the U.S. I think we'll do a show on suicide and opioid deaths soon. I've talked about this before, about the betrayal of by the intellectuals of the common American, and the despair that so many Americans feel, and I think they're taking it out by taking opioids and committing suicide. We'll talk about that. We'll do a show on that. But so, maybe this is just that, but it is a little suspicious that these oligarchs, that they all have some relationship, or most of them have some relationship with the oil and gas business industry. Most of these deaths happened after the war started. Very, very strange. Somebody's killing somebody off, and this is, of course, in the context of Dugin's daughter being assassinated last week. In a failed attempt to assassinate Dugin, his daughter got killed in his stead. Well, I'm glad I'm not going to Russia anytime soon. And certainly, if I go to Russia, I'm asking in the hotel for a first floor room. Although, I could still commit suicide by hanging and leave a note. All right, so that is that part of Russia. I want to talk a couple of things about Russia. First, Russia won Ukraine, a couple of things to note. Note the complete disregard by the Russians for human life. I mean, when you start a war, that is a beginning of disregard for human life. But note the one where they're basically fortified in a nuclear power plant and using it not as a human shield, as a nuclear shield. The Ukrainians basically, if they bomb it, they get the fallout from the nukes. It's a scary situation. I guess some scientists just arrived there to try to figure out what the damage is, but it seems like the Ukrainians and the Russians have been doing real damage to this nuclear power plant. Remember, this is not far from Chernobyl. Chernobyl was in Ukraine. This is probably a nuclear power plant not that different from Chernobyl in terms of its history, in terms of when it was built. And it's really scary if you live in Central Europe. what's going to happen to this nuclear power plant kind of in the middle of the war, and the Russians, seemingly at least from what we're reading, not caring about the possibility of fallout, the possibility of a nuclear disaster at this nuclear power plant. So scary stuff. In addition, you might have read, might have heard, I mean, there's very little news about the war in Ukraine these days. It's just not sexy anymore. It's just gotten out of the headlines. But the Ukrainians have mounted somewhat of an offensive against the Russians. They are trying to reoccupy or trying to retake occupied territory in the south of Ukraine that the Russians took at the beginning of the war around the city of Kherson. It's hard to tell what kind of progress they're making. It's obviously not super fast, but they are hopefully making slow progress against the Russians. The people I usually read in order to get information about what's going on in Ukraine that have proven to be unbelievably accurate during this war, they all basically are silent about this offensive that Ukrainians engaged in, so as not to give the Russians any intelligence about the advancing Ukrainian forces. But there's some reason to be hopeful that Ukraine is going to, inflict another significant military blow against the Russians in the south, drive them out of certain territories in the south, and retake or take back Ukrainian control vast areas in the south. As you probably read in the news, Ukraine have managed to inflict some real damage to infrastructure that the Russians had built in Crimea. So the Ukrainian, special forces or spies or guerrillas, however you want to call them, are functioning in Crimea, which has been controlled by the Russians until 2014, and have significantly damaged Russian military forces down there. So this war is developing very, very slowly. I think it's going to continue to be very, very slow. Part of the problem is the Ukrainian has is they took so many casualties, particularly in the east. They just are not replenishing the number of soldiers fast enough to actually field a force large enough to counterattack the Russians in a significant way. Note that the Russians are basically stopped, being stopped. They've not progressed at all in about a month. They took the two cities in eastern Ukraine, and since then have gone nowhere. They've poked around here and there and tried a few times and been beaten back. And there's been no significant Russian offensive in Ukraine for over a month now. This suggests that the Russian forces are depleted. They're frantically trying to raise new troops in Russia, but they're having a real hard time both getting troops, but even more importantly, they don't have equipment. All the equipment that the Ukrainians have destroyed, it's very hard for the Russians to rebuild and resupply because their factories depend on Western technology. Their factories depend on Western parts. Their factories cannot produce free of Western trade. So the sanctions, in that sense, are holding back the ability of the Russians to rebuild their military supplies. So I think I'm still positive that Ukraine is going to beat back the Russians. How far they can, whether they have the resources, whether they have the manpower to actually beat back the Russians back to the Russian border, I don't know. But I do think that the Russians are going to take some significant losses in the months to come, particularly in the south. And probably in the northeast around Kharkiv. We'll see exactly what happens there. The fact that we're selling them weapons is slow. In the weapons, you need to train people to use them, but they also just don't have enough soldiers. At the end of the day, to take ground, you need infantry and you need tanks. And the Ukrainians just don't have enough personnel to take ground from the Russians. Now, they're slowly chipping away. They're slowly taking ground in the south. But to really beat back the Russians, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult. All right. Any other Russian stories? I think that's it. I mean, as I've said in the past, Russian economy continues to suffer significantly from this war. Both the sanctions are having an impact, particularly the inability of Russians to import technology from the West. But more importantly than that, I think just war costs you, and there's a brain drain. People are leaving Russia. People with talent are leaving Russia, and economic activity has gone to a halt, as it does during wars. All right, let's see. Let's take a couple of Super Chat questions here. We're way behind today in Super Chat, but we'll see where it pans out. Catherine is not here. That's why. When Catherine is not here, we tend to lag significantly, but we are way behind. But still, the evening is young. Michael says, you said you fundamentally don't get why people don't understand objectivism. I think it's primarily because humanity hasn't been switched on yet. Most of the population consists of non-player characters, but that switch is coming. I believe that switch will come. It's frustrating. Does it come sooner? It's frustrating that so many smart people refuse to turn on the switch that allows them to think for themselves more philosophically. It's sad that it is taking so long, because there's real victims to the fact that it's taking long. All of our lives, all of humanity really could be so much better off, so much happier, so much richer, live so much longer, have so much more fulfilling lives. And it is truly sad that we're just not there yet. But we will get there. I agree with you, Michael, that we will get there. Thanks, Michael. Richard. Oh, I haven't seen Richard in a while. Richard, welcome back, Iran. Hope you're feeling better. How many Russian scientists and engineers would move to the U.S. if we had a rational immigration policy? A lot. Thousands. Smart engineers who could, in the American environment, much more so than in the Russian environment, actually make a significant difference, actually really change things. So, yeah, a lot, thousands would move here, absolutely. Steven says, watch that movie you recommended about German Stasi. Any other obscure recommendations? Is that The Lives of Others? The Lives of Others, great movie, one of the best movies of the last 30, 40 years. Fantastic movie about East Germany, East German Stasi. So do I have any other obscure recs? Lots. I mean, it depends really. Do you like old movies? Do you like young, will you watch black and white? I've recommended these movies. I just recommended, I don't know, many of you are young and probably haven't even watched a movie like Casablanca. I mean, watch Casablanca. It's a great movie. It's a really, really, really fun, interesting, heroic, romantic, beautiful movie. And if you like Casablanca, you might want to watch a movie called To Have and Have Not with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. You might like that, but those are black and white movies. But the era of great movies that where every year dozens of movies were really enjoyable, really good. All right, over time I'll recommend more movies. I'm going to talk about today. We'll talk about Patriot, the movie Patriot with Mel Gibson. I promised to review that movie, so we'll do the movie review of Patriot today. Let's see. Richard says, I'm very depressed by the immigration system. My girlfriend is here on a visa and in a very tough situation because of her inability to freely compete in the labor market. Why don't more people get enraged by this? I don't know. I mean, I'm enraged by the immigration system. Of course, I've experienced it as an immigrant. But I'm enraged by the extent to which America is losing because it has such a restrictive immigration system. The extent to which America, particularly in the last 3 years, 4 years, the extent to which America is losing, that it is not anywhere near its potential. And you can see that in the fact that 11 million jobs are going unfilled right now in America. There is massive demand for employment. We need more entrepreneurs. We need more business creation. We need more geniuses, but we also need more gardeners. We need, across the board, we need more people. And neither political party will actually advocate for increasing immigration in a rational, proper sense. It is one of the great travesties of the 21st century. I've promised this before, but it's coming. I'm going to be doing a show on immigration soon, and it'll piss so many people off. I'll probably lose, I don't know, hundreds of subscribers because of it. But we're going to do it anyway. So that's coming. Yes, open up the frigging borders. Let people in. All right. Okay, wanted to tell you something before we go on, just quickly. So when I go to California in the summer, I do this thing called health nucleus, right? I think I've told you about this in the past, where I go and I get this full body, everything tested, and it's quite an experience. They treat you amazingly. They give you a suite, and then they keep you rest in a suite, and then they keep taking you. So I did an hour-long MRI of my entire body. They did a separate MRI just of my brain. It turns out I have one. I'm still not sure if it's healthy. We'll find out soon. But anyway, they do a whole body. They do the brain. They do an echocardiogram. They take a gazillion amount of blood. I mean, literally, they ran out of blood in my right hand, so they had I'm kidding, but they had to take out blood from my left hand because they took out so much blood. They run my genomic tests. They run every other blood test imaginable. They do it all. They compare it to the genome, to what your known genetic issues. They do a family history. Really unbelievably comprehensive test. And part of what they do is when you leave, you put on and I have it right there, you put on a heart monitor. So I have this thing right here, kind of attached, which basically is keeping track of every heartbeat that I take for anywhere between 3 days and 2 weeks, basically until it falls off from the sweat and the showers, and then you send it in, and they analyze it to tell if your heart is performing the way it's supposed to perform. And then another thing I have, and is I've got a continuous glucose monitor, which they put on. It's for 2 weeks. It's this little thing over there, right? And it basically is constantly keeping track of my blood sugar. So I just ate pizza, right? I ate pizza I don't eat pizza much, right? Pizza's pretty rare for me to eat. I ate pizza, and I want to see how's this affecting my blood sugar. So the reason I'm doing this spiel is because I have to test, and I didn't want you to see me test without explaining why I'm doing it. So here I have an app, right? There's my app. I click on check glucose. I put the phone right next to the sensor, and there it is. My blood glucose is 119, which is high. And it's been up, you can see it's been up close to 150 earlier today. And you know why it's high? Why is it high? Because I ate pizza. And the crust, the bread, turns into sugar. And there's scientific evidence, proof, that when you eat carbs, your blood sugar spikes. Now, I have a healthy response to this because you can see the line coming down. Blood sugar spikes, and then the insulin responds, and the blood sugar comes nicely down. If it doesn't come down, that's when you're in trouble. That's where you probably are getting diabetes. So this is great. So I do this for 2 weeks, and the beauty of it is that what I do is I test to see which foods spike my blood sugar. And so I ate pizza today. Wow, that's the highest spike. I eat these fried plantains, chips. Those cause my blood sugar to spike. And like you could tell, because carbs generally and sugar, I don't eat much sugar at all. But carbs and sugar talk. But it's cool to kind of see it in real time. You can test just before you eat, just after you eat, and then like 15 minutes after you eat, and you can see how it goes up. And then a healthy response is it goes up and then comes down. And of course, a healthy response, it goes up, but it doesn't go up too far. So I don't want it to go up above 150. That's like my limit. Although, according to this, 180 is pretty healthy. But I'd rather keep it under 150. I tend to be on the low end, which is good because according to my genes from the genomic test, I'm probably susceptible to type 2 diabetes. So these are the kind of things that are... This makes you optimistic about the world, right? I mean, you could do this today. You could literally in real time monitor your health, monitor everything that you do, and tell how you're doing. You know, I can monitor my sleep, how many hours I sleep, how many times I wake up. I can monitor my exercise, what my heart rate is at, my energy level. It's stunning. Because of this watch, and this is only going to get more powerful over time, you're going to get your glucose readings on the watch at some point. With this thing actually has a needle inside of me measuring blood sugar in my blood, but soon they're going to be able to do it through the skin. So it really is amazing what you can do today in terms of preventive care, and in terms of monitoring, and in terms of discovering problems early. Because if you can discover, for example, cancer early, most cancers are curable. It's when they're discovered late that they're killers. So, like the MRI, because I do it every year, now they're doing some MRIs every 6 months. It's likely that I will discover if I have cancer early and be able to treat it early. So, Daniel is freaked out by a needle. Really? I mean, needles are great. Nothing wrong with needles. Just a little prick. No big deal. All right, so just thought I'd give you an update on Health Nucleus. You should look them up. Human Longevity is the name of the company that runs this thing. You can find their website, and you can, those of you interested, I know a number of my listeners have signed up and are regularly go to get their checkups at Health Nucleus. Let's see. Oh, Richard has another follow-up question. Even a spousal green card can take 7 to 11 months. Even with the current regulatory burden, we could easily double our GDP with more immigrants. I look forward to YBS and immigration. Yes, absolutely. We'll talk about what would happen to global GDP if you just open borders across the entire world. Now, I know you guys are now freaking out. Oh my God, what will happen if we open borders? All these people, you know how rich you become? Anyway, all right. Richard says, Health Nucleus sounds super amazing. I love medical advances. Is it true it cost $25,000? It didn't cost me $25,000. Now, maybe they've raised their rates, but no, it cost me, half of that. So check, and if you ever sign up for it, say you got the referral from Yaron Brook. I don't get anything, but you might get a discount. They have given people in the past a discount for saying that I referred them to, them to them, whatever, right? Okay. Still way behind in the super chat. Okay, so Powell, our economic guru, our central planner in charge of our money and interest rates, spoke on Friday morning. Was it Friday or was it Thursday? Anyway, yeah, it was Friday. Spoke Friday morning to let the world know what he's planning for us, because we want to know what our rulers, what our central planners intend to do for all of us. Anyway, Powell gave a talk. There's an annual talk at Jackson Hole. There's an annual conference of central bankers in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And at the end of that conference, traditionally, the chairman of the Federal Reserve goes out and gives a speech, and the markets watch carefully. And everybody's waiting for this speech because, of course, in August, the Federal Reserve doesn't meet. So we don't get that announcement, interest rates going up, interest rates going down. So we didn't really get any news from the Fed during August. So this was the opportunity to hear what Powell is thinking. And what he's thinking is what I expected he's thinking. He's thinking that as a central planner in charge of the Federal Reserve, his primary responsibility is to reduce inflation. And that reducing inflation is going to be very expensive. It's going to be very hard. It's going to be very painful. Now, he didn't say that because he can't say it's going to be very painful. He'd be fired. He'd be brought in front of Congress and whipped. But the language he used was different. No longer was he talking about the potential of a soft landing and being able to raise interest rates without harming the economy. Now he talked about some pain, that the economy was going to feel some pain, that employment was going to decline, that businesses were going to struggle. He said it in a very soft, careful, not too serious way. But that's a big move. And the markets took it as a big move. He said he is committed to reducing inflation even if it causes pain. Since that speech on Friday morning, markets have been tumbling. Before that speech, markets were optimistic. The world was fantastic. Inflation was killed. Recession was avoided. I don't know where they got that from. I have no idea where that story came from. But it seemed like that's how markets were behaving. Well, since then, the markets are down a lot. Economists call what Powell was suggesting, they call it a growth recession. A growth recession. Now, if there ever was doublespeak and concepts that mean nothing, what the hell is a growth recession? I guess it's a term that was coined in 1972 by an economist. To suggest that the economy doesn't quite contract, but it grows very, very, very slowly. And it still grows, but it's basically a recession. And the idea now is we're not going to get a soft landing. Our really, really smart financial commentators are telling us we're not going to get a soft landing. We're going to get a growth recession. We're going to get slow economic growth for a long time, which will be painful. Now, I've been saying we're probably going to get slow economic growth forever. I said that after 2008-9, and it was true. Under Obama and under Trump, our economy grew very slowly. It could go slower, I guess. Instead of 2%, it could grow at 1% or 0.5%. 2% is pretty pathetic. But I have been saying to you guys for a while now, and I still hold to it, that we're going to have a real recession. We're going to see the U.S. economy shrink. It's going to be painful. It will probably happen at the end of this year, more probably at the beginning of next year. And then, after this painful recession, usually what happens is you get a big uptick. I don't think you're going to get a big uptick this time. I think this time you're going to get what is it? What do you call it? Growth recession. I think we're going to get a real recession and then a growth recession. Right now, I think the markets are still too optimistic in terms of how they're pricing the pain. I think they're still pricing the pain being pretty light. I think that's, at least they took that from Powell's speech. But I don't think they're taking it seriously. I don't think they take seriously the meaning of inflation. I don't think they're taking seriously the impact it has on investment. I don't think they take seriously the impact it has on, long-term investment. They don't take seriously. What happens when interest rates go up significantly, when you get an inverted yield curve. They're not taking seriously what a recession looks like. We haven't had one in such a long time. And the last one we had was kind of a weird one because it was focused primarily on the financial sector because of the housing crisis. We're heading towards declining home prices. So we're already seeing the beginnings of home prices going down. Certainly home sales are down dramatically, which has a ripple effect to the furniture industry, to a bunch of other industries that depended on home builders and home sales and people buying new homes. All of that is in decline. So I think we're in for hard times. And I don't think markets, and I don't think Powell, and I don't think our politicians, and I don't see anybody out there really taking it seriously. Again, I don't expect the collapse. I'm not seeing the dollar go to zero. On the contrary, dollar's getting stronger. I think the dollar almost hit 140 yen today, which is great for me because I'm going to Japan in a few weeks, and my dollars are going to buy a lot in Japan. But 140 yen, I don't think it's ever been 140 yen, or in a very long time, the dollar's been that strong. That's pretty amazing. We now have the dollar being worth more than the euro. The euro is worth 99 cents. The British pound now is at $1.16. I remember the days when it was $2 to a pound sterling. So while everybody is committed to the dollar collapsing, the dollar is doing better than any other currency. Why? Because as bad as things are here, things are worse over there. The UK is heading towards an even deeper recession than we are. The European Union is heading towards a recession and maybe significant financial crisis given the fact that Italy can't pay its debts. And Italy and maybe Spain and Greece and who knows who else. Japan's in trouble. Japan's been in trouble for decades. So, I think we take too lightly the idea that things will always get better. Things will always get better. That's not guaranteed, and we live in a very, very, very difficult, uncertain time economically. It is scary times. I find it. I don't know. I told you the best investment to make when this all began late last year, when inflation started to tick up. I said the best thing you can buy is rental properties. And man, was I right on. I wish I'd bought some rental properties because I didn't, but I wish I had, because rental properties are, their value is going through the roof. Why? Because people can't afford to buy, so they're renting, and rents are going up, 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 even as the value of single-family homes is starting to come down. Jose is asking about Latin America. Latin America is a disaster. Latin America has decided that what they really miss are the socialists. So Brazil is about to elect Lula, the corrupt socialist president they had in the past. Argentina is Argentina. They always have a socialist mess. They elected a socialist. Chile, the most free market economy in Latin America, has elected a socialist. For the first time in Colombia's history, Colombia has elected a socialist. Bolivia is Bolivia, socialist. Peru kicked out a socialist and just elected a new socialist. And Venezuela leading the pack. So it's like all of Latin America looked around and they said, who should we imitate? Chile, that went capitalist, or Venezuela that went socialist? So Venezuela went from the richest to the poorest, or Chile who went from the poorest to the richest? Oh, well, of course we should emulate Venezuela. So, like, Latin America is a disaster. A disaster. Every single one of those countries that had voted in, Brazil, a populist rightist, in Colombia, a right-wing guy who said he was going to endorse capitalism, never did. He even read my book, Equal is Unfair, and he still didn't have the right policies. I guess Ecuador is the only one that still has a center-right. But every other country in Latin America, and we can talk sometime about Latin America and why it's so socialist. Maybe when I'm in Latin America, I'll do a show on why Latin America is so socialist. Lula tried to run for president. He's not in prison anymore. He was charged with corruption. I remember the day he was arrested. I was in Brazil, and the cheering and the celebration. He's going to win the presidency. Just like the left in the short run is going to win in the United States. So this is my last topic I'll talk about today. I don't know if you saw, but Sarah Palin lost an election for a House seat in Alaska. Alaska has only one House seat, so it's it's a statewide office. She lost it to a Democrat in Alaska, a red state, solidly red state, a state that has been Republican for a long time. And Sarah Palin, well-known Alaskan, who used to be the governor of Alaska, lost. Yeah, you can blame the electoral system. Republicans always have excuses, 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 and excuses. The fact is she lost. And the fact is the Republicans in a series now of House elections lost. They lost in upstate New York. And one has to really wonder, yes, low turnout. Yeah, there are lots of excuses. Roll them out. Roll out the excuses. But this was supposed to be a red wave. Republicans were supposed to soon, in a month and a half, 2 months, take the Senate, take 50, 60 seats in the House. It might not happen. At this point, it's doubtful they'll take the Senate. And there's a small risk they don't take the House, which was unthinkable just a few weeks ago. So, Republicans have an incredible capacity to snatch, or to embrace defeat when they were so close to winning, when they're so close to winning. It truly is scary. I'm scared because what would truly be a disaster for this country is another 2 seats in the Senate and the Democrats holding the House. But Republicans are so stupid, so bad this year, so Trumpist, blindly Trumpist, that could happen. That could happen. And of course, we could have Trump running for president from jail. Who knows? Or under indictment, at least. All right, let's do some super chats. Vikram from India. Hey, Vikram, thanks for joining us. Vikram asks, Yuan, given the coming economic turmoil, are you being circumspect about personal expenditures? Is that something one should perhaps start factoring in? I mean, it depends on your financial situation, right? It depends on your financial situation. I am confident in my financial situation. I'm not too worried. I'll start getting concerned when my income from the Yuan book show starts declining. So far, it's been super stable. I wish it was growing, but it's super stable. My hedge fund is doing very well this year, very well relative to everybody else, but well. So I'm okay. I'm not personally worried, and I'm not cutting back personal expenditures. But yeah, people should. Now's the time to save. You don't know who's going to lose their job. You want to have some money in the bank just in case you do, and to have that flexibility to spend some time looking for the next job. You might have to move in order to get the next job. So you definitely want to think about it. You definitely want to consider the fact and do some risk assessment. Assess your situation, your life, what you're facing, and whether you should be cutting down on spending and increasing saving, at least for a while, until you get a better sense of how things are going to develop. So depending on how old, young you are, whether you have kids, whether you have a family, whether you're supporting that family or not, one income, two incomes, a lot of things to consider, but every person should be thinking about it. Remember thinking? Prime virtue in objectivism. You got to take the data and examine it and think about it and evaluate it and have a strategy around how you're going to deal with an economic downturn. And if you land up losing your job, how are you going to deal with losing your job? Richard says, Republicans keep losing because they're running socially conservative nut jobs. And the American people, especially middle class people, don't want it. Push aside theocrats or classical liberals and they'll start winning. Yes, I agree. It's not even theocrats. Some of them are theocrats, but they're running conspiracy theory nuts, like the guy in Pennsylvania, the guy running for governor in Pennsylvania. They're running all kinds of weirdos, the kind of weirdos that Trump has embraced in the Republican Party, raised, has promoted, has endorsed, and who are more and more become the Republican Party, the conspiracy theory, election denying, they just and combine that with the fact that they are religionists and they hold religionist views. And yes, Democrats are making the most out of the abortion issue. Most Americans are pro some abortion. They're pro-abortion in the first trimester. They're pro-abortion for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. They don't want a complete ban on abortion, as some states now are putting in place. It's going to hurt Republicans because it's going to motivate women, it's going to motivate young people to go out and vote because it affects them. All right, let's see. Okay, so still behind, guys. Still way behind. $440 to go to make our goal. So let's run through these super chat questions. We'll see if more show up. Otherwise, we'll call it a night. All right, Jay Lord, who do you think is a bigger threat, the woke communist left or the theocratic Christian fundamentalist right? Well, I think there are two ways of looking at this. In the short run, I think the woke communist left, and I don't even think they're communist. I think that's too nice. I think the woke nihilist left are more dangerous than the Christian fundamentalist nationalist right. I think the reason is that they control the institutions, they control the universities, the schools. Right now, they're in the White House, they're in the House, and they're in the Senate. They control government. So the woke the woke nihilist left, while it doesn't control all of the left, has a huge impact on the left. It has a huge impact on the Biden administration, has a huge impact on others on the left. And in the short run, they are the greater threat. Certainly at the universities, they're the greatest threat. But I don't think long-term they provide a governing ideology. I don't think their ideology can win as a governing ideology. Democrats to win have to elect moderates who then are influenced by the nutty left. But as soon as the American people get a sense that the nutty left is winning, is having an impact, they lose. And indeed, I think that Biden can lose, will lose, if, big if, Republicans run somebody other than Trump. I mean, this is what Republicans don't get. And I've been saying this at least in 2018. Trump is a loser. He is not somebody who can win or who can rally a party around a platform and around ideas and around personalities that the American people will vote for in large numbers. Yes, he got a lot of votes, but the people who dislike him outnumber the people who like him. And that's true of Trump, and that's true of his acolytes. It's true of his followers. Right? So I think Trump would lose to Biden, and I also think he's the only Republican who would lose to Biden. And while I'm not always particularly good in predicting elections, I have been pretty good lately. I predicted Trump would lose. I predicted Republicans would lose the Senate in Georgia, given Trump's behavior. I predicted they'd lose the House in 2018. Everybody predicted that, so that wasn't that big of a deal. I predicted that Trump would say he didn't lose the election and there was fraud. I predicted that before the election happened. So I've got a pretty good track record so far, but we'll see. Prediction is you can easily get easily miss on prediction. It's a probabilities game, right? Roosevelt, thank you. Really appreciate the support. So long term, I think that this country is much more aligned with the right than the left. I think that a time of desperation, a time of economic collapse, a time of economic struggle, this country will not go communist. It will not go left. It will go to whoever wraps himself around with the flag, wraps himself around God. So God and country are what I think is the winning strategy in a time of crisis. And so I think long-term, I agree with Lander Peikoff and the dim hypothesis. I think long-term, the real threat to this country is religion and nationalism, and particularly religious nationalism. And if you read the statement of principles of the national conservatives, the nationalist conservatives, that should scare you, because that's exactly, I think they have a winning strategy there if they can find the right candidate. And I think they are likely to be the authoritarians out there. All right, before we go on, I promised to do a movie review. That's right. So I think Dave asked me to review the movie Patriot. So I watched it. I watched it on one of the flights from California. It's with Mel Gibson. It was made about 20 years ago. It's a very well made, very well produced, big scale a movie about probably going to be spoilers here, about a very well respected farmer in South Carolina who is a hero of the English war against the French and the Indians that happened before the War of Independence. He's a hero of that war. And yet when it comes to join the Continental Army and to fight the British and to fight for independence, he refuses to join. And he's got a famous line in there, something like, when you have family, when you have to think about family and the well-being of family, you can't afford principles. You can't afford principles. Now, what he discovers in the movie very quickly, which is a true lesson, is that in a war, you can't be neutral. Certainly not in a war of good versus evil, you can't be neutral. In a just war, you have to take sides. Now, I have to say, to the extent that that is the theme of the movie, I don't think it's the best movie ever to do that. I think there are much better movies to do that. But the movie that came to mind while I was watching it is Shenandoah. And here's an obscure movie you've probably never heard of that is definitely worth watching. It's with Jimmy Stewart. It's a movie about a farmer in Virginia during the Civil War who refuses to join the South in fighting the North. He does not own slaves, and he refuses to fight for the right of slave owners to own slaves. He doesn't believe in slavery. But he suffers the consequence of war because everybody does, because war is devastating. And it's a very beautiful and powerful movie, depressing movie too, but very, very powerful, much more powerful than The Patriot, I think. So anyway, he suffers in The Patriot, and he suffers primarily because it's not that he comes to a realization, you know, the principles of the American founding are principles worth fighting for. Liberty and freedom, I should really fight for them. I can't stay neutral with a battle around that. It's not that he comes to admire the American Declaration of Independence or the set of ideas behind them or the principles behind them. None of that is true. Basically, in order to convince him to go to war, the movie, which is thoroughly, in a sense, really Marxist, I think, the movie cannot make an ideological argument. So it makes an existential one, a material one. It conjures up a really, really evil, horrible British villain. So it's not enough to fight for liberty, to fight against taxes, to fight against a king who would oppress you in some way or another. The only way you can convince this patriot, and it's called Patriot, the only way you can convince this war hero to actually join the war is that one of the Brits, protected supposedly by the general, is just a monster. Just a monster. And that's and the rest of the movie is basically, him joining, and he's a military genius, so he wins every battle, and there's some moral dilemmas, and the other aspect of it is there's a very Christian theme to it, where he did some horrible things in the Indian War, in the French and Indian War. He was brutal to the French and the Indians, and he feels like he's violated God's law, and God is going to punish him. And he gets punished in this movie. I'm not going to tell you how, but he gets punished in this movie. So there's a theme of retribution, but it's couched in very kind of Christian, sacrificial terms, which I don't think, which again I think is overkill for a movie that's supposed to be about the War of Independence and about patriotism. The movie never gets there. Because like so many Americans today, the movie has no concept of what America is. How can you be a patriot with regard to something you don't know what it is? The movie doesn't understand America. The movie doesn't understand what makes it strong. The movie doesn't understand why it's worth fighting for. The movie's just an action movie, good versus evil, just a British soldier who's just slaughters people just for the sake of slaughtering them. So it's shallow and anti-American in a sense that the fighters don't fight for the ideas of America. He fights for basically against, what he's fighting is against the brutality of what he associates now with the British because of this one really, really evil character in it. So, the movie's enjoyable, some good action scenes, the good guys win, the bad guys suffer, the bad guys die, but some good guys die too, and there's a lot of pain in the movie, I think purposefully, because the victor has to suffer through pain. It's part of the theme of the movie, but it's not a great movie. It's not a particular good movie about America or about patriotism or about the Declaration of Independence, which is kind of the story it is telling. The story it is telling is not well told, but it is a real, in a sense, the battles are all true battles. the politics and the warfare is real and really happened during the War of Independence. So it was interesting in that sense. All right, hopefully that was of value. And Dave, if you have any additional questions about the movie, have any thoughts about it, let me know. Doug just sent me a song review ask. All right, we'll do that. Let me just find it first so I don't forget the song. I know I have the file somewhere. There it is. All right, let's go back to the Super Chat and cover some questions there. Thank you, Doug, for asking about the song. I added it to the list. I'm behind. I'm behind on the songs and in the TV series, but I will catch up. All right, let's see. Rue Downs says, as a sports fan, it would be great to see objectivist ideas make an impact in this realm. Selfishness is brought up and misused on a daily basis. If you were a sports coach, how would you inspire your team? Well, it's easy. You inspire your team to win. Victory is in everybody's self-interest. Victory is what it's all about. And, think about the team as having to work together to win. You could have the greatest player in the world on your team and still lose. Just ask the many teams that had LeBron James in various incarnations on their teams and still lost. And they lost because they didn't have a team. They didn't have the pieces. They didn't play together. They didn't play as a team. Look at the Golden State Warriors, who don't have a player of the caliber of LeBron James and yet have won 4 championships. That's because they play as a team and they're brilliant as a team. So what you want to focus on in sports is on victory. The purpose of sports is winning. Competitive sports is to win. And therefore the focus on victory and what is necessary for victory in team sports is playing as a team. So it's not selfless to give up the ball if the purpose is victory. So it's absolutely, I would argue to the team, in your self-interest. It is the selfish thing to do to pass the ball if the other player can make the shot, not you. Yes, I've got 2 or 3 Star Trek episodes that I owe, I think, Shazbot or somebody that I still have to review. It's coming. It's coming. Shazbot, oh, there you are. If workers are exploited, when a businessman makes a profit, does that mean that businessmen are exploited by workers when the business loses money? No. That's all the businessman's fault. He just did a bad job. He's incompetent, and he deserves it. And to the extent that any money is generated, it should go to keep the workers afloat for as long as possible. And indeed, some other businessmen should be forced to buy the business so that they can keep paying the employees. Because the purpose of business is to keep food on the table for employees, not for profit. I am not serious, but that's what people think. So no, businessmen are not being exploited by workers according to them. Now, are they indeed? In reality, no. I mean, a business loses money. There's no exploitation here either way, either side. We lose money in a variety of different circumstances. Sometimes it's our fault, sometimes it's not. And in any case, it's not exploitation. There are bad trades made every day. Whoops, skip that one. All right, did that again. Bree asked, do you think the incredible rise in the dollar will continue, or will the rest of the world be forced to raise interest rates? Well, I mean, they're already raising interest rates. The UK is raising interest rates really fast. It's not just interest rates. It's how bad is the economic outcome of all of this going to be? Who is going to be left standing at the end of this cycle? What currency do you want to have in your pocket after China and Europe and Latin America and UK get into financial trouble and suffer a deep recession? Is America going to be in better shape than they are? I think the bet in the world right now is yes. The bet in the world right now is you'd rather have dollars than any other currency. Not today. Not just for today. Not just because, the fact is interest rates in the U.S. are not high. They're super low. The 10-year today was supposedly high. It was what, 3.3%? Inflation's 8.3. It's a -5. I wouldn't buy a 10-year bond right now. I don't know who is. Somebody is. So people are buying the dollar, holding dollars, in spite of low interest rates. In spite of the fact that in the UK they're raising interest rates as fast as we are. It's not just about interest rates. It's about interest rates, but it's also about the strength of the economy. And the belief is in the world out there right now that the U.S. economy is stronger in spite of its weakness. It's stronger than any of these other economies in the world. And I think generally I agree with that, and generally history supports that. Although we do have an administration bent on destroying whatever goodness there is in this economy. Valdrin says, I'm 1% Jewish. Might be lying. Gimme. Well, I'm 100 times more Jewish than you by that standard. So I want a gimme with big cap letters. This relates to the idea of reparations for building the pyramids. Liam says, I cringe when non-objectivists say they're selfish, because from my experience, people who proudly use the S word are narcissistic, nasty people who set the real egoistic movement backwards. I agree completely. And sometimes some objectivists who should know better behave in ways that are narcissistic and nasty that set the movement backwards as well. But yes, if we're going to use the word selfish, if we're going to use the word egoistic, let's model their true representation, which means rationality, which means reason. James G. says, I see 4 things greatly impacting the world in less than 5 years. They are grain demand, biofuels, weather, and fertilizer. What do you see globally? I don't think weather is going to be that big of a factor. I think basically it's going to be the cost of energy. Energy generally, broadly, electricity. Here's a story I wanted to tell you today. This is a classic. California is asking electric car owners not to charge their cars in the next few days because the electric grid is overloaded because of the heat wave. This is a day after they announced that California is not going to be allowed the selling of gas-fueled automobiles from 2030 or 2035 onwards. You can't make this stuff up. One of the biggest problems with electric cars is, where are you going to get the electricity to charge them all? If every American tomorrow had an electric car, where's the electricity going to come from? We don't have the generating power. We don't have the grid. The grid is going to blow up. It doesn't have the capacity. So energy, broadly, from fossil fuel to alternatives to electricity, how to energize the car, the whole thing. How you do that, that's going to be a major issue in the next 5 years. I don't know about grain demand, but cost of food is going up because of inflation and because of wars. I don't think weather, no hurricanes this year so far, pretty weird. So other than energy, I think we're going to have to really grapple with the consequence of the decline of China. I think China is going to be in decline. I think global supply chains are going to move away from China. And that's the other big trend. The other big trend is anti-globalization. I think globalization has been one of the most beneficial things to happen to human beings ever. Globalization of the last 40 years, 50 years, really since World War II, slowly progressing. And we're moving away from that. I think that's going to be a big trend in the next 5 years. So anti-globalization, energy, cost of energy, demand for energy, extent of energy, are going to be the two main thing, and then potentially food because of inflation and because of war, and then the consequence of the decline of China. Will China go decline quietly, or will China try to go out with a bang? But the world is in decline relative to where it was heading 5-10 years ago, right? And I think it's why Trump won. It's because that mentality is on the rise, and that mentality is not good for the world. Jonathan says, does objectivism condone parents sacrificing their own lives to save the lives of their children in extreme circumstances? Yes, of course. Your children are an immense value to you. Not being willing to try to save your child, even if the cost of giving your life would be a life not worth living, given the extent of the importance of your child to you, it really is a selfish choice of saying it's not worth for me to live not saving my child, letting my child die without trying to save them. So absolutely. And not just for, and I wouldn't call it a sacrifice exactly, but not giving up their lives for their children, giving up their lives for a cause can be selfish. I don't want to live in an unfree country, therefore I am willing to fight for freedom, fight for liberty. That would have been good if Mel Gibson's character in The Patriot has said that. So don't take selfishness as just meaning staying alive. It means pursuing your highest values. And if your highest value is a certain type of life, not just life, but a certain type of life, then if that certain type of life is threatened, you're willing to risk your life to preserve it. James, have you noticed more people renouncing citizenship? I haven't noticed it, but it seems to be more in the air. I hear more about it than I did before. Now, I've known people who've renounced citizenship going back to the 90s, but it definitely seems to be accelerating these days, and I don't blame it, people. America is not as special as it used to be. America is in decline. Its specialness is in decline. America is being killed by Americans. You know, whether Americans of the woke left or whether it's the Tucker Carlsons of the world, America is being killed by Americans. And by the way, again, Leonard Peacock predicted this in his talk in, I think, 2002, titled Americans versus America. The conflict between America and what it represents, what it stands for, and Americans. Matthew, thank you. I appreciate the support. James says, San Francisco, San Diego for health nucleus. This time, in the past, I've gone to San Diego because that's where my doctor is. She left, so I've switched doctors, and now I'm going to the San Francisco clinic. I'm hoping they open up one in Miami one day, because that would be much easier and really cool for me. Francis, will you be looking to short the markets down? Look, I don't give investment advice. I'm not giving investment advice. I'm always short some stocks and long some stocks, but I'm not taking. I think shorting is very expensive. Shorting is very risky. You better know what you're doing. As an individual, I would never recommend that you short markets. If you're going to short markets, you better be a pro and you better know what you're doing. Right now, for every dollar I have, for every dollar, you know, for at least some of my dollars, for every dollar I have a dollar short. So my purpose is that my longs outperform my shorts. And so far this year, I've done okay. Daniel says, probably a dumb question. How would you apply objectivism to the first colonizers of Mars? Would we have to work as a collective first? No. I mean, hopefully the colonizers of Mars would be a private business run by a private corporation. The land would be, you define private property in Mars by whoever used it. You'd basically have a, what do you call it, a homesteading act for Mars. People would work there under contract. You don't have to do big projects. You don't have to be collectivist. A company's not collectivist. Contracts are not collectivist. Joint ventures are not collectivist. So you have to work with other people. You have to work in groups. That doesn't make you collectivist. Michael asks, can you think of an example where the practical is not the moral or the moral is not the practical? Ultimately, over the long run, no. I think the two are corollaries of basically the same thing. In the short run, yes, sure, you can find stuff like that all the time. But it's not really, because it plays out over a longer period. Yeah, collectivism is not collaboration. Collaboration is collaboration among individuals who can be individualists. Yeah. Robert Heinlein had some good books describing the kind of process of of going to the stars and colonizing them. Taylor Caldwell's novels used to be bestsellers. I wondered if she was influenced by Rand's work. Can her historical novels be considered romantic? I don't know. I don't know if she knew Ayn Rand. I don't know of any connection, and I don't remember if I've read any of her books. So can't help you there. You'd have to ask somebody who's more familiar with literature. All right, I think we're done. Short, about $200. If somebody wants to step in and fill the gap, that would be great. Or if some of you want to just fill in the gap with a little bit, that would be great too. No, just you can make a contribution on Super Chat without actually asking a question. You can also support the Iran Book Show on a monthly basis, kind of with monthly contributions, which is the way we really like it, on Patreon, on Subscribestar, and on iranbookshow.com/support, which is really through PayPal. So feel free to support the show value for value. Hopefully you're listening, you're enjoying, you're getting some value out of what I'm presenting. You can express the value that you get with a contribution on one of these platforms. Particularly those of you who are not live and who don't use the Super Chat feature, it's a great way to show your support of the show and to keep the show going, and to keep the activity, to keep everything we do going. All right, guys, I will see you all. Sorry about the glitches early on. I will see you all on Saturday, probably 3 p.m. Eastern time, maybe 8 p.m. We'll see. But I'll see you all on Saturday, and have a great week. I'll see you all.